Hello and welcome to our Winter Adaptation in Action webinar series. Today we'll be talking about climate threats to outdoor recreation. And we're the University of Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership, or MCAP. My name is Jamie, and we're really excited today to be co-hosting with the University of Minnesota Tourism Center. Our presenters today include Choi from the University of Minnesota Tourism Center, Popp and Kristy Maki from the American Birkebeiner, and Bauer from Grandma's Marathon. So thank you all for being here, and we're really excited to get started. As I mentioned already, we've got 3 different presenters today representing kind of a cross-section of outdoor recreation. And what we'll do today is first we'll do a brief intro. We've already started a bit with that, and some housekeeping. And then I'll start with a basic climate context. So kind of framing what was up with this winter. It was a little bit different, as probably you all noticed. And going into the spring, it's still feeling a little bit different. Then we'll get into with our presenters and panelists. And we'll end with kind of discussion and Q&A. And also to bring to your attention some upcoming events. So I mentioned this webinar is this year it's going to be quarterly, so we've got a winter sort of themed webinar. We'll have a spring webinar in May focused on changing rainfall patterns. Another event to bring you guys' attention to is the National Adaptation Forum. It's going to be in St. Paul in May, so check that out if you're interested in something like that. So I'll just give a quick intro of some of our deeper intro to our panelists and presenters. Dr. Choi is a tourism specialist from the U of M Tourism Center. She has a PhD in natural resources science and management, and a focus on recreation resources in tourism. And she's going to be talking about climate impacts on outdoor recreation. Our next panelists are Popp, and the next slide will have Kristy as well. So Ben is the executive director since 2013, so pretty impressive, of the American Birkie, Birkebeiner or Birkie. Lots of people call it the Birkie. He was also the executive director of the Sisu Foundation from 2018 to 2013. And I'd like to highlight, I'm also an Oli, so Umiaya. I'm very happy to see that. And then Kristy is the event director since 2018 for the Birkie. And then before that was the operations and sport development director. And pretty cool, also an alumni connection, a U of M alumni connection. Pretty cool in applied plant science. So I'm a forestry person, so I was happy to see some plants. And then next is Bauer. And I have to say, I really love this picture, Shane. Posing next to the porta potties, very important during a marathon. So Shane is the executive director since 2015 for Grandma's Marathon, and another local connection, Bemidji State University. So very cool. We're very happy to have all of you here today, and I think we'll have a great discussion. Some friendly reminders. So the webinar will end at 1:30, and during that time, all the participants and folks listening will be muted, but we'll have a discussion Q&A at the end, so we'll open that up then. And then this will be recorded and posted on our MCAP YouTube channel at a later date, so you can share that, rewatch all the best from this presentation. And then just to orient you a little bit to what's on the screen and navigating that, so you're all muted. So please use the Q&A feature to ask questions of your presenters. Feel welcome to add those questions throughout. We'll focus at the end on a Q&A section, but if there's questions that we can answer along the way, we'll get to those. And then you can type in a question, or you can upvote a question. So if there's one you really like and that's, oh, I was going to ask that too, you can use the upvote function there. And then we'll end promptly at 1:30. Okay, so now this is just for me to lay some groundwork for all of you, and get us all in the context. If you didn't notice, it was a pretty warm and weird winter. These are just some of the records and highlights from that winter. So the December through February meteorological winter, that was the warmest on record at almost all stations, weather stations here in Minnesota. And then those winter heat waves produced record high minimum temperatures and all-time monthly high temperatures, which is pretty striking. The Twin Cities as well broke its record for the number of 50-degree Fahrenheit days for early February, which is pretty wild. Like that's pretty warm. And St. Cloud and Twin Cities also observed their longest January thaw on record. And most areas received less than 50% of their normal snowfall through the end of February, and there were 30 to 70 days since December 1st with no snow on the ground at all. When we look at that in a larger context, 2023 itself was really an exceptional year, not necessarily exceptionally good, but exceptional in terms of it was very noteworthy and different. It was the warmest year since records began in 1850, and 2023 was 2.12 degrees Fahrenheit above the 20th century average. And there were 28 weather or climate disaster events. So that led to losses exceeding $1 billion in 2023. And that's compared to the 1980 to 2023 annual average of 8.5. So that's more than double the amount of climate disaster and weather events. And the most recent 5-year average is 20.4. You can see on this figure of the globe, most of it's red. So that means it was warm. In some places particularly warm. We can look at this at the level of the United States as well. So it was an exceptionally warm winter. On the left side of your screen, there's that red figure, and on the right, it's red and blue. So the left side is showing for December. The right side is showing for January. And the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Great Lakes area in both cases was much warmer than the average temperature. We can also look at this in some additional historical context. So there's this weird year, 1877 to 1878, that's termed Minnesota's year without a winter. And that's the dot on your left. Then this I've titled Minnesota's Year Without a Winter 2.0, because it's pretty similar to that really odd phenomena we had back in the 1800s. In fact, a little bit warmer even. Another thing to highlight about this, you might notice that red dotted line across there. So that's our average temperature, winter average temperatures. And you can see that line has an upward trend. So we've been getting warmer in general. The climate has been warming. Our winters have been warming more so than any other season. So that's two things you can kind of point out from there. And many of you have probably heard this word all winter, El Nino. So it's been an El Nino year. That accounts for most likely that 1800s high temperature winter. And certainly this year was an El Nino year, particularly strong El Nino year. But like I said, with that trend line, it's also climate change. We're also warming. But El Nino is this shorthand name for warmer than normal surface and near surface waters that develop and persist near the equator in the central and eastern Pacific, generally for periods of 9 months or more. So in that figure, you can see the red for warmer temperatures in that area of the ocean. This is an example from December of 1997. So there's El Nino and La Nina. You can kind of see in this figure, El Nino is on the left with that orange, that warmer air, as well as drier air. So we've certainly had a warmer and drier winter here. It's generally flipped for the southern part of the US. So what we've been experiencing here is different from what other parts, more southern parts of the US have experienced. And then when you look at La Nina, that's on the right, that's usually when we're colder and wetter. And we can look at this El Nino effect as well as that gradual warming of climate in figures like this. So this is showing the December average temperature from 1973 to 2023. This is a figure from Sven Sundgaard using the National Weather Service data. It's highlighting El Niños, but in particular super El Niño, which was what we experienced this year. So this year, the super El Niño is when water temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean reach at least 2 degrees Celsius or warmer, and that makes weather events even more extreme. So in summary, it's really this combination of El Nino that you can see from the additional warming, making it more and more severe. So the warmer we get globally through climate change, the more impact that will have on these El Nino events as well. Then looking into the future, all we've looked at right now has really been historical data. This is using data from the Minnesota climate, so downscaled projections at a high resolution. And we can see the projected difference in future winter snow cover depth. So on the left, that's for mid-century, and on the right, that's for end of century. And what we're seeing is an average projected decrease of about 1.1 inches to 2.7 inches throughout Minnesota under a very high emissions scenario. So that's pretty, that has a lot of implications for our outdoor recreation, in particular in the winter. And then pivoting this kind of to talk about what we're here for today, thinking about adaptation and action, thinking about steps that we can take. How freaked out should you be about Minnesota's current winterless winter? Many people were very freaked out. This is a quote from our director, Dr. Heidi Roop, saying, "I don't know that freaked out is how I want people to feel. My question is, how do you take that concern and translate it into action?" We love to talk about the weather here. I'd love for people to talk about the weather and then talk about how they're going to be part of the climate solution. So I think that's a really good framing. And then I'll just add here at the end, this seems like a big pivot, but one thing I want to make sure we're talking about when we think about climate action is how we are advancing issues of equity as well. So climate change is affecting all of us, but it's affecting frontline communities, people of color in generally more severely. And so what we need to be mindful of when we're thinking of outdoor recreation as well is who's getting to participate in outdoor rec. How do we envision a future under climate change that kind of helps advance equity for everybody? And so I just want this to kind of be in folks' mind as well, that like right now, most of the people who are getting to participate in outdoor rec are generally white or more privileged. So how do we envision that future where we're addressing these climate issues and making sure we're bringing everyone together into that future where we still get to enjoy the outdoors and make sure that's for everyone? So that's the climate context. I hope you're all feeling very climate sciencey now. I'm going to hand it over to Ami, and she's going to put more of that climate in context of outdoor recreation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take it away, Ami.
Are y'all able to see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
All right. My screen is kind of crazy right now. Well, thanks, Jamie, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Ami Choi, statewide tourism specialist from the U of M Tourism Center, and I'll be talking a bit about climate change impacts on outdoor recreation today. All right. So, as Jamie mentioned, I'm going to broadly cover the risks and impacts of climate change on outdoor recreation and some of the equity considerations and opportunities and strategies for the future. So to start off with, I just wanted to briefly cover what's projected in terms of climate change across the US, pretty similar to what Jamie's been talking. So I'll stay at a really high level. We are expecting to see rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, sea levels, more extreme weather events, and shifting seasons overall in every part of the US. And these changes are already happening across the country and have become more obvious. So I'd anticipate that you've already sort of started to notice these changes in your own areas. Turning our focus to the Midwest region, including states like Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, and Wisconsin, Midwest might be particularly vulnerable to climate risks due to agriculture and the forest systems. Some of the region's key climate risks between now and 2013 are warming temperatures, extreme precipitation, drought, and extreme weather events. And these trends are expected to become more frequent and intense and negatively impact forests, water ecosystems, economies, especially within sectors like agriculture, tourism, and outdoor recreation, infrastructure, human health and safety, as well as livelihoods and cultural practices that rely on natural resources, including winter activities or local plant harvesting. For some additional context, I wanted to include some data from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis and their outdoor recreation satellite account, which measures outdoor recreation economy both at national and state level. And so according to the BEA data from 2022, outdoor recreation is generating 563.7 billion, that is equivalent to 2.2% of GDP for the nation, and supporting nearly 5 million jobs. And the top revenue generating activities, according to Outdoor Recreation Satellite account, are RVing, boating and fishing, motorcycling and ATVing, and snow activities. In 2022, the outdoor recreation industry in Minnesota added $11.7 billion to the state's economy and supported over more than 93,000 jobs, accounting for 3% of the workforce statewide. The major sources of revenue were activities like boating, fishing, RVing, hunting, motorcycling, ATVing, and snow activities. This winter, you might have seen this from the local newspaper. Everything is quite different. We're experiencing a winter that has changed so much of what's used to be normal here in Minnesota. And so this article came out early March saying that due to the historically warm winter and lack of sustained freezing, the ice rinks melted quickly, resulting in substantial financial losses for the park system, and their leaders are now sort of reconsidering the future of the outdoor ice rink system in a warming climate. Also, a very chaotic picture from the warm winter. And also, the Birkie ski race, which we'll be learning a little bit more from later in our webinar today. It's a very famous and most loved iconic cross-country ski race. And this year, due to the warm winter and thin snow conditions, participants had to ski on shorter loops of artificial snow. In terms of the summer, we had the Twin Cities Marathon canceled last year, October, thanks to the wild heat. And the Grandma's Marathon that happened a few months prior in June also had a tough time over heat, humidity, and wind, and not to mention the smoke from wildfires in Canada. These were some of the biggest challenge for the runners. So we'll hear more from these guest speakers in a bit, but I really wanted to say kudos to the organizers for pulling off such a successful event despite all these weather and climate related challenges. So what does climate change mean for outdoor recreation? My best answer is start with this Venn diagram. So some of you may be already familiar with this Venn diagram with three intersecting circles: environmental, social, and economic. And these are the three pillars of sustainability. In the tourism world, we often use this framework to talk about sustainable tourism development as needing to be environmentally friendly, economically viable, and socially equitable, ensuring that the benefits of development are equitably shared across communities. And so these three pillars are interconnected and they influence each other. If we apply this to climate change impacts environmentally, warmer temperatures and extreme heat can negatively impact our air and ecosystems. Economically, unsustainable environmental conditions uh, meaning can mean huge economic loss for communities that depend on tourism and outdoor recreation, with less people visiting, reduced property values, and jobs and services disrupted. At the social level, climate change increases health issues and inequality, limiting opportunities for outdoor recreation participation and access to clean water and healthy food, especially among low income and communities of color. So from this quick snapshot, we can see that there's interdependence between the social, environmental, and economic dimensions. And so it's important to also think long term about climate change impacts in relation to these three aspects. Now, you might be asking, how do these climate trends interact with outdoor recreation and what kind of impacts could we see? Recent studies have indeed suggested nature-based tourism is especially vulnerable to changes in climate, such as the weather patterns, the changes in environmental conditions that can directly influence outdoor recreation experiences. So this diagram is from a 2021 study on how climate change directly and indirectly impacts tourism and outdoor recreation in Indiana. And I thought this was a great visual to sort of help conceptualize how climate change affects different aspects of natural and human environment, which then affects tourism and outdoor recreation. And so I'm not going to go through all, but just one quick example I can share could be as the climate continues to warm, it may lead to new patterns in outdoor recreation with a longer season of favorable weather, which might bring more staffing challenges on the management part, but also open up opportunities for generating more revenue. On the other hand, activities that depend on snow, such as downhill skiing, cross-country skiing, and snowmobiling, will face challenges due to less snow and less stable snowpacks. And so particularly with less snow, the types of activities that people engage in might need to shift to things that can be enjoyed with less snow. So climate change impacts really the supply of outdoor recreation and nature-based tourism opportunities, but it also affects the demand visitors place on those opportunities, as well as their behaviors and experiences. So in response to conditions that people perceive as not favorable or ideal, people change their behaviors to find ways to cope by changing the activity or choosing different sites to visit, change the timing of the visit, or seeking information like a weather forecast to plan trips, or they use different strategies by using different gear or equipment. So this figure is from a study that was conducted in North Shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota during both winter and summer seasons. And it looked at general trends in recreationist climate-related coping behaviors, and they examined how visitors have actually responded to past climate-related impacts like warming temperatures, more variable precipitation and such through 5 coping behaviors. And they were also interested in seeing how do visitors' personal attributes, like the socio-demographics, their past experience, climate change perceptions, belief, concern, and worry sort of influence their coping behavior. And so one of the key findings they had was that winter recreationists, younger visitors, and those concerned about climate change are more likely to adjust their behavior to cope with climate and environmental changes. So winter recreationists in particular are much more likely to report having experienced a past climate-related impacts and that weather information, alternative gear, and flexible scheduling for their visits are important in overcoming these issues. And additionally, younger visitors were more likely to use information coping, like the weather forecast, and switch locations or activities as strategies to respond to these climate-related challenges. And so as we anticipate shifts in demand and adapt strategically, understanding the relationship between visitor characteristics and coping behaviors is important and something to consider for outdoor recreation management and adaptation. Next, I think it's important to touch on some of the intersections between climate change, outdoor recreation, and equity, environmental justice, although very briefly, given our time today for this presentation. So warming temperatures in the summer may benefit recreation by creating opportunities for paddling or other forms of activities. The more days with extreme heat and air pollution can disproportionately affect BIPOC populations. Studies have suggested they report having the highest rates of asthma and asthma-related deaths in the US, and air conditioning and water security isn't always given for some of these populations. And it's more concerning for those who are BIPOC, low income, elderly, or people with disabilities. Extreme rainfall and heat can also be significantly concerning when it comes to taking care of the elder and people with disabilities. And extreme weather and other climate change impacts are also going to affect spaces with cultural and historical significance. And it's especially concerning for indigenous people as climate change related impacts are causing loss of tribal land access to culturally important resources, sites, and plants. Also, I think that it's worth considering how information is communicated to people, for example, with limited English proficiency, and how we are ensuring that we are reaching a wider and diverse audience with messaging I think it's very important. Also, outdoor recreation at a local level, it's supported by a lot of small businesses, if you think of it. So with weather becoming less predictable, it may be even harder to plan for the future. So for many communities, especially in rural areas, the jobs and services these small businesses offer are really crucial. So on a larger scale, when we think of adaptation, it's important to consider if and how we can support adaptation for these small businesses and rural communities, whether through policies or practices. Also, the census report states that the US population has significantly diversified since 2010. And in Minnesota, the Black and Asian population is growing at the fastest rate. However, there's been a gap between the demographic growth and the actual people who are participating in outdoor recreation. This finding is from the 2022 State Park Visitor Study, and we can see that only 11% of BIPOC communities were visiting the state parks. And so how will we extend this to Minnesota outdoor recreation and having fair and safe access to the outdoors? What demographics are typically participating in outdoor recreation opportunities the most is the ongoing questions we need to ask ourselves and consider. Also, some opportunities and strategies for the future. For the industry adaptation, local support, policies, and new management approaches, regional partnerships, and a networked approach to communication are all very important things to consider and keep in our mind as we go forward. Also, if you need a bit of more inspiration, this is a good resource from the National Park Service. They have a very long sort of guide to help park managers address the effects of climate change in plans and decisions that best preserve and protect the park resources, but also to address the enjoyment of outdoor recreation. So this might be a good resource for you to check out if you're more interested in this topic. And I will end there. I'm sure I've forgotten something, so I'd welcome any questions or suggestions that you have. And please also don't hesitate to reach out to me if you want to talk about just tourism and outdoor recreation in general. And this is also my contact information if you'd like to get in touch. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ami. That was wonderful. I really appreciate you putting that all in larger context for us. So great job. We're going to hand it over now to Ben and Kristy from the Birkie. And then after that, Shane from Grandma's Marathon. I'm going to, if you guys want to share your slides or pull up that screen.
Yep. All right. Bear with us a second up here in the North.
No problem.
All right. We're getting there. 1 second. Go down here. Okay. Come on. Aha. Can you see it?
Yep, looks good.
All right. Good. Thanks everybody for having us. And my name is Ben Popp from the American Birkebeiner.
I'm Kristy Maki.
And so I think just a few minutes about the Birkie in general. We'll go through quickly. I'm not sure how familiar people are with it or are not. You may have heard, as was alluded to earlier, there was some change this year with the American Birkebeiner due to weather. And we do have a couple videos. We were actually struggling with them. So if it doesn't work out exactly, we'll include them in the email follow-up afterwards. But there's some, I think, some kind of cool drone footage of what happened with the event this year. Has it had to evolve and the like, but we'll get to that here shortly. So first off, so the American Birkebeiner actually started in 1973 by a man named Tony Wise, and he was from Hayward, World War II veteran, and he came back and he thought he was going to build this great event. And unfortunately, it went bankrupt in 1984, and this foundation was formed, which is now the American Birkebeiner Ski Foundation, which has been here since, as I mentioned, January of 85, and has a mission of putting on world-class events. It started out with just this Birkebeiner ski race, but has since evolved into 40 some events now throughout the year, as well as the American Birkebeiner Trail, which we'll look at here briefly, spans Hayward to Cable, some other associated trails. So it's just over 100 kilometers of ski trails and hiking trails in the summer. And then just promoting active outdoor lifestyles that I think we're passionate about, and why climate is important to us, because we want to be able to put on especially these winter events. And so it's certainly something that's important. But at the end of the day, the vision, our why, is really inspiring people to challenge themselves. We think that these athletic endeavors that you partake in really change your life in a meaningful way. And it's important that we are able to provide these opportunities. So for us, when we start to think about the importance of having a medium to do that year round, and that means not just in the summer, of course, we end up doing things like we did this year because we think it was really important. And we'll get to some more of those specifics here shortly with Kristy. But so this is the American Birkebeiner Trail. It actually starts up in Cable. It winds its way through Sealy and then down to Hayward. And just to give you an idea, it's about 98% in public lands. In our case, mostly county forest, Bayfield and Sawyer counties. And so it's really a public-private partnership between the public entities being Bayfield and Sawyer County, and then us as the nonprofit that maintains that trail throughout the year, be it through skiing, mowing, erosion control, and the like. This is what we hope it looks like on any given winter day. This was taken a couple years ago, but the trail average is about 40 feet wide, and it's really a great place for people to come learn to cross-country ski, or to challenge themselves cross-country skiing, or to have an event cross-country skiing. And then flip that into the summertime. This was from this morning. There's just a couple live pictures of up here in the Northwoods. As you can see, most of the trails in downtown Hayward, of course, no snow. This year we've had 14.1 inches of snow. We averaged just over 60. So as you can, and the largest snowfall we had was, wait for it, yep, That's right, on Halloween. And so it was a really challenging year for us. The economic impact was brought up earlier. Certainly really hard for our small local community that really lives on outdoor recreation. I chair the Council of Outdoor Recreation here in Wisconsin, and it's been a really big struggle for the northern communities and ability to continue to attract people here for oftentimes these events that, in this case, many times were canceled this year. As you see, there is some snow up in that upper left-hand corner still. That is the American Birkebeiner start line where we actually made snow. We will get to that again in a second. I hope this video works, but if not, we'll recap that maybe in a different way when we get to that. But that was actually the start line where we made snow earlier this year. This is just a sort of a fun little graphic that I wanted to end with, in just that this shows some of the different events that we put on throughout the year up here in the Northwoods. And as you can see, a majority of them are in the ski category, and even some down in the live are skiing related, including the Ladies Fat Bike Getaway and Nordic Kids and the like. And so really for us, having a true winter climate is really important. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're now adapting to that, or trying to adapt to that, and see how we can do it as well, as we mentioned, in a sustainable way, because sometimes adaptations in the environment don't go hand in hand. And so I think being really meaningful about that is going to be really important. Anything in general before we go on the specific stuff? No? All right. So, okay. This was a video. We'll see if it plays. I'm just going to show you a part of it. So this is a video from 2023, and the reason I want to show it to you is what Birkie typically would look like. Lots of snow, trails, a variety of events, going from people to Hayward. There's a normal winter, all kinds of people having fun on the snow. We're going to fast forward it a little bit. 2, 1, and they're off, ladies and gentlemen. You get the idea. Lots of people, lots of fun. This is an open track of the we started on Wednesday. Enjoy the day! And so, I'm getting a feeling for it. I don't know if I can actually. Believe it or not, I know that's. But in general, just want to show you that briefly. Sort of Birkie from a normal status, if you will. All right, so now this was this year's Birkie, and I'm going to play this video. There's only a minute, so I'll play the whole thing. There's not audio with this one, but I think you're going to get a sense. That was that same American Birkebeiner start line, but there was the race course. As you can tell, no natural snow. All of it was machine made. And the whole goal, and Kristy will talk through this a little bit more extensively here in a second, but the idea being that it really wouldn't have happened without a really significant adaptation. So, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about how we got here in the next slide, and maybe that's how we can open into the moving snow if we can't get the video to play, but we'll see. Looks like we didn't feed all of our squirrels that ran around the internet up here in the Northwoods today. But that's okay. We're going to move to one more that hopefully allows us to move on. We'll see. All right, 1 second. Pausing that one. We're going to go to the next one. Okay, so this is a little recap slide, and it was about 2.5 minutes, and I'm not sure if I'll show you the whole thing or not, but what I really want to highlight here, it was a recap of the week's event, some of that same video you just saw, but what it's also going to show you, and then we'll maybe take a pause and talk through that, is in early January, it was realized that there was a good chance we weren't going to be able to have the American Birkebeiner on natural snow. Kristy can talk through a few of the contingencies we had, but the team really started to spring into action on plan B, C, D, E, F, and G, which I was really proud of the fact that we had plan B, C, E, F, and G, but because I think we knew how important it was for our local economy, as well as the greater ski community, to bring it together for a variety of reasons. So I'm going to play this video, and again, we won't play the whole thing.
For 5 decades, the American Birkebeiner has triggered a seasonal pilgrimage.
The Birkebeiner is a special sort of race, the Boston Marathon of cross-country skiing.
Every February, cross-country skiers traverse the globe to take on the daunting hill.
Gosh. So there was this big black screen and a spinning hole, and that's how we adapted to the American Birkebeiner. Let me see if we can try this one more time. Oh, come on.
Of the Birkebeiner Trail in the Wisconsin Northwoods. But in its 50th year, despite the lack of a winter season, thousands still completed their seasonal migration. All because one creature gave them hope: the elusive Nordic whale. Measuring over 100 meters long and nearly 3 stories high, this snowpile-shaped beast is extremely rare in this part of the continent. Even more rare is when it travels with a mate. Atmospheric conditions determine its very existence, which is often short-lived. But its sacrifice propels a greater cause. And in the midst of human history's warmest winter ever recorded, North America's largest cross-country ski race and week of skiing celebrations still entranced the world.
Because I want my grandson. I want him to learn to love skiing the way I do.
Thank you for being here.
Right, left, right.
Yeah, I felt amazing. It's been so fun all week, like talking with people and getting the Birkie fever.
It is so cool to finally be a part of this. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time.
And now I can finally say I'm a true Midwesterner.
All right. We're going to see if we can. Okay, so we'll take a little pause there, and I just want to talk through that a second before Kristy talks about her adaptations. But so basically what happened, typically the American Birkebeiner starts making snow around Thanksgiving, and we have our first initial kilometer, 2 kilometers of snow, and we call it the Turkey Birkie. And it's really a way to kick off the season of cross-country skiing. And this year we had about 800 meters. It was actually quite difficult to make snow. And we have an event a couple weeks later. It had been warm. Just were able to get it. It's a youth event called Get You Gammy Games in December. We got through that and we thought, all right, great. It's going to start snowing around Christmas. Because we have, in January, the 4 weeks, we have 4 events, 1 a week in the month of January. So knowing that it hits really hard, it's really important to the local economy. We actually, in the late part of December, over Christmas actually, decided to bring our snow guns back out. We had 1.5 kilometers or 2 down. Normally they're all packed up. It's ready for Mother Nature to kick in. And we made the hard decision because it's really expensive to bring them back out and make more snow. And so we did that, thinking, all right, we'll make a little bit of snow for this events that Kristy has coming up. And lo and behold, they made it. And then it just continued to get warmer. And so the Trails and Facilities crew and everybody put our heads together and decided, you know what? We're actually bringing the guns back out in January. And there was one little 10-day cold period in January where they worked around the clock for 11 days, never shutting the snow guns off to make as much snow as we possibly could to see that if we needed it, in theory, still thinking maybe we could patch the trail where it might be thin after we got natural snow and the like. And ended up, of course, the story goes, there was no natural snowflakes, and the crew ended up deciding, all right, we're going to try and make a loop course up in Telemark where we have this property, we have these big snow piles, and we're going to see what we can do. So I don't know, maybe you want to take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, so you remember earlier in the presentation, there was a map of Cable to Hayward, which spans 50 kilometers, multiple different venues along that route. We, in a couple of weeks, had to shift from 30 miles of venues and course to getting it all within approximately a 1.5 mile radius. So we moved everything to a lap course where we could move the big whales of snow that the trail crew had created, create a course. all January long, we had about 4 kilometers, and we ran all of our January events on that, which was a big change from what those events normally are. Normally, we do have multiple venues. Even in January, we moved everything up to the American Birkebeiner Trailhead, ran everything out of there because that's the only place where we had any snow available. So then looking into February, we had been working with a meteorologist who said, you guys are going to get snow. I'm confident that you guys are going to get snow. It just might be a little bit warmer than normal. And he was right about the warmer than normal part of it. But unfortunately, the actual regular snow, natural snow, never ever came. So by February, we kind of saw the writing on the wall and said, we need to start coming up with these contingency plans, but we still have 3 weeks. We want to be able to run an event on the most snow possible. So instead of just saying we're going to have 4 to 10 kilometers of snow, we've created multiple plans, which is very time consuming, so we could maximize the amount of snow. The shorter the course meant the more congested a course meant we wouldn't be able to have people race to their full extent, and the more changes then that we just had made that will impact how registration and things work moving into the future. So February 12th, we made the decision that we were going to have to go with our shortest course, which is 10 kilometers, that we felt comfortable running over 13,000 people on. So here is our 10-kilometer course. Over 5 days, we ended up having over 10,000 people on this course. And it was a quick switch to change all of our materials from our regular participant guide and spectator guides in just a few days to this new course and make completely new plans. So we had a lot of things to reconsider. We went to a multi-lap event because all we had were 10 kilometers. Normally the races are 50 kilometers, 29, and 15. So we adjusted all of those distances. And so we had days where 30 kilometers was our longest. We had Saturday, our elite wave, where 50 kilometers was the longest race. So we had to really pivot quite a bit and come up with new things for all of our events to make sure that we were engaging our participants. It was something that they wanted to do, they were willing to do, and that would still mean a lot of excitement for the whole week, because on top of this, we are celebrating the 50th American Birkebeiner.
I think one thing that's pretty cool you should touch on, how you came up with 30 kilometers is the distance. Did you just think, oh, 30 will work? From like congestion wise, and I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so we did work with some data analytics, looking at modeling of the course and what can a 10-kilometer course handle? What kind of snow conditions do we have? How is the machine made snow? What is our thickness? What is our width? How can we get so many people on this course, and what's realistic for the course holding up, and for people actually getting through it in a reasonable amount of time. So we couldn't keep it 50 kilometers for everyone. There just wasn't enough time in the day to get people started and finished and have good skiing conditions throughout the whole thing. So we did do a lot of modeling of the course and how people would move through the course to kind of figure out what would be doable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty amazing because you have everybody's time data for the last however many years, and so you can put that into models and watch and see, well, that doesn't work. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was really helpful. And we had to make some decisions on what events would be held on snow, which events would not be held on snow, how many people can we fit in the venue at one time. All of our parking was a little bit different this year. Usually we're on frozen ground and we're using snow to create rows for parking cars. We had no snow for creating rows and berms. So we were dealing with a lot of mud. We were dealing with a lot of additional fencing to create structure where we are using snow. So we ended up having skiing and having people do their American Birkebeiner, Quarterlope, and Prince Haakon over 5 different days. Typically, that happens over just 3 days. We had almost 10,000 finishers over those 5 days. On Saturday, which was our main day, we had a 50-kilometer skate race and a 30-kilometer, more of a tour for most of our waves. We brought in over 15,000 spectators on that day to the location. So people really embraced it, wanted to celebrate the 50th, and it was actually a pretty exciting week up there.
The other cool part was that having the best skiers in the world here after being in Minneapolis as part of the World Cup was pretty darn cool. So I think that the other part of this that I think is important to us is we know that changes impact climate as well, or just our daily activities, how we normally put on the event. So we've launched what we call Birkie Green about 5 years ago as our initiative to say, hey, things like making snow as an example. Well, if we need to make snow to continue to have skiing, well, that consumes a certain amount of energy, and how are we going to do that in a sustainable way? Okay, if we're going to make snow, it has to be solar powered. So those are some of the decisions that we're making as an organization to say, yep, these event experiences are really important. Kristy's team is going to figure out a way to make it happen, but we also, back to that Venn diagram, have to make sure it's sustainable. Otherwise, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit. So we just wanted to finish up with a couple slides around Birkie Green, as we call it, and some of the examples that we're utilizing, and knowing that they're just a small example, but hopefully we can lead by example a little bit in that. Hopefully that inspires others to make some of these adaptations in their daily lives and events similarly. So couple of things in here. The bibs ones are kind of cool. Six bottles, I believe. Is it 6 bottles per bib?
Yes, 6 water bottles. We use a recycled fabric for all of our bibs for Birkie Week, and it's taking 6 plastic bottles worth of plastic into each bib.
I think that's kind of cool.
It is great.
Car chargers, obviously, we're trying to accommodate more and more. It's actually interesting. In northern Wisconsin, it's one of our challenges. There aren't a lot of car charging stations. And believe it or not, people are seeking out our trailhead locations, which has been kind of cool because we have them there. Then they plug in, go for a hike, go for a ski, go for a bike, and head back out. Adding solar, that's our office is run on solar now. We have an electric snowmobile. That was actually some funds raised to do a lot of our typical trail work this year. Unfortunately, didn't get a huge amount of work. It sat in the shed most of the year, good, bad, or otherwise. One of the things we also offer our participants of the events are actually, we participate in Bayfield's forestry carbon capture project. And so they can purchase carbon credits as part of traveling to the race, which we think is kind of cool because that county forest is actually where the Birkebeiner Trail is. So that's been a popular program that we launched 2 years ago.
And that's part of registration. The registration, they have the opportunity to do that.
And so these are just the sort of 5 areas that we continue to think about as we try and reduce our footprint, everything from raceway and energy to alternatives and moving forward sustainably. I think we talked about the bottles, solar, and so I think that is.
Yeah, and so some of the things that we did at this year's event, we were able to TerraCycle a lot of our packaging. The medals come in plastic packaging, our hats come in plastic packaging. And while we do work with a lot of our suppliers to reduce that packaging, we can request that 50 ski ties go into a plastic package instead of just 20 as normal. We still, when you have over 13,000 participants, you still produce a lot of plastic packaging. So we're able to TerraCycle that. Our bibs are also TerraCyclable. All of our plastic packaging, our fuel wrappers, and our snack food packaging from this year, we TerraCycled more than 2 pallets worth of those products this year. We've also gone to our compostable disposables and food in the soup tent. So all of our bowls, napkins, and spoons at the end in our finisher food tent, all of it was compostable. We diverted over 10 cubic yards from landfill, and that equaled over 25 tons of carbon dioxide that was kept out of the atmosphere. This was our pilot year for testing that. It was very, very successful, and the food tent was a really good place to put that into place. And then we work with a lot of our sponsors and our vendors. Untapped provides all of our fuel. We work with them to get more bulk packaging and things that are reducing our packaging and waste that when we are using large amounts, especially at aid stations and at the finish line. We also did a floral wax take back program with one of our partners. So we do not allow any floral waxes on the American Birkebeiner venues or trail, and not in any of our races. So we provide a place where people can turn in those waxes that have fluorocarbons in them. For a number of years now, we've also had a Birkie gear bag program. This year we sold over 2,500 gear bags. We have sold, of our 13,000 participants this year, almost half of them had a previous Birkie green gear bag that they used. So out of 13,000 participants, we only gave out about 2,000 to 2,500 plastic bags for gear during the week. So that's been a very popular program, and we see now way more gear bags that are reused at the event each year than the plastic bags. So we're really excited to reduce our amount of plastic bags, and we're trying to use more sustainable and reusable and recyclable products at all of our events now.
I think that's at the end. Let me see. I will stop sharing, and there you go.
Well, thank you both so much. That was awesome, and just provides like such a great example of all the efforts that you're doing at the Birkie, and also an example of like, what do we do with changing climate? How do we still hold this, and how do we do it in a way that is adapting? How do we think about sustainability? How do we think about our audience? So thank you for that. That was wonderful. I'm going to hand it over to Shane now, and he's going to talk about probably some pretty similar things, but in a totally different arena, which is Grandma's Marathon.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me okay, and you can see the screen here?
Yep,
looks good.
Okay, we have a great wheeler field. I always love opening with this graphic. We don't often get like the greatest runners in the world. Sometimes we do, but we always get the greatest wheelchair athletes in the world, and we're pretty proud of that division. But I'd just like to cover some of these things that in the big picture relate to the topic here at hand. And I'll try to go through the slides as quick as I can. Obviously, I think the conversation that's missing is what do we do going forward, rather than what are all the things we've done. And I'd like to leave, obviously, as much time for questions as possible here. So the thing that I think applies the most is how this entire, I love the sustainability pillars, by the way, how our event affects all three of those pillars in this region is, I think, the most important point, because Grandma's Marathon is literally a cool event, and that's part of the draw. Running along Lake Superior is unlike most other marathons out there. Big Sur is probably the best comparison, where you're running along the Pacific coast over there. Both highly rated marathons. Otherwise, runners are mostly running in downtown cities and major metro areas. The gist of it is they come to our event, have a completely different experience. I mean, in the end, they feel like celebrities here, because there's this whole runner's village in Canal Park where the finish line is, and the entire experience is different from what they're used to, where you get to fly into a race and you hop in a taxi and you talk to them about, they often don't even know there's a marathon happening, in the bigger cities. And I'll get to a graphic on that. But here, it's all that's happening. There's literally nothing else that can happen on the weekend of Grandma's Marathon, the way that fills up the hotels and things. So, but part of that draw is the time of year as well. And our average starting line temp of 56 degrees Fahrenheit is a big draw for runners. It's always a Saturday in June. That's unique. Most of the major marathons are on Sunday or Monday mornings, when you don't tie up. It's not as big a deal to tie up traffic, in downtown areas and things like that. And then it allows people to celebrate their run with a big party afterwards. This is an old graphic. We're over at Bayfront Festival Park now. But people like to make a whole weekend out of it, and they can do that here. And of course, Lake Superior is the big driver. The science is not set on this one, but I'm in the camp that you definitely go in Lake Superior after your race. It's an absolute ice bath, and your recovery can be a lot better by immediately, well, not immediately, but eventually taking your ice bath after you've ran. it can cut your recovery time in half, but don't quote the science on that one. So right now, Grandma's Marathon is the 10th largest marathon in the U.S., but by far the smallest regional host out of all of them. So it has a $20.6 million economic impact on our region, as found out by the University of Minnesota Extension, and we're going to be updating that study this year. I can't imagine it's not going to be higher with the numbers we have. Here are the biggest marathons in the country, top 20. And there you can see what I'm talking about. These are all major metro areas that you fly in to run downtown city blocks. Then there's little Duluth in there. And it just kind of shows how this elevates our region, not only in the running community, but just in general. It really puts Duluth on the map in this whole area. We know people that stay as far away as Spooner, which I couldn't believe when I heard. Ely, people are up there making a week out of it. Grand Rapids, I mean, these are 1.5 to 2 hour drives away, but they're staying there and then coming to Duluth for the race and making a full week out of it. So it's a pretty big impact. The only other one on there that might stand out is St. George. That's a unique one. It's pretty much straight downhill the whole way. So runners love that advantage at that one, but you will pay for it the next day with your quads. I guarantee you that. We have an entire community that comes out for this event annually each year, which we call the small town charm. And it really adds to that experience the runners are having. This is somebody who lays out over 100 trolls on the street for runners as they're running by. Some runners add to them and take them. And it's kind of a troll library, I guess. But the community is the thing that, and our volunteers specifically, we don't have over 5,000 anymore. Again, old graphic. We have over 3. But that's one thing in the event industry that's been tough. You hear from everybody is getting the volunteers these days. It's been, ever since the pandemic, a struggle. But we're able to still put on a quality race as long as we get 3,500 or so volunteers, with creating some other efficiencies. It's still the most crucial piece to the experience that runners have. All we hear about is our volunteers. And then sponsors, to have over 100 sponsors come from your community. Well, a lot of them coming directly from the community. That's huge. It's a lot to manage, and it creates a whole nother job description within our staff. But we're super grateful for the support we get. Obviously, this is Super One Foods on the race course handing out strawberries, and they're just one of many sponsors that do so much, and from a product perspective. Sustainability is actually one of the areas we like to take the lead on. So we're signatories in the United Nations climate dialogues. There's a lot of progress, I think, being made on a global level. In my experience, in the conferences we've gone to, we sent our sustainability director to London to the big Sport Positive conference out there a few years ago. And this is us at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which is a zero waste event, technically, all things considered. We did the behind the scenes tour there. And, you know, we work with the Council for Responsible Sport for the accreditation and these things. And what I find is that in our country, we're a little behind. Actually, there's a lot of ideas that can be taken from Europe, especially, and other places that we can start employing. And we'd like to be that leader just because we're along Lake Superior, and I feel like we should be. I mean, this is one area of the country that we want to obviously preserve, and I think it's kind of top of mind for people compared to some other places. Safety and security is another one. I probably don't need to get into too much here, but we have a nationwide conference ever since the Boston Marathon bombing that we all come together on best practices there as well. Efficiency, this is the half marathon start line. We have one of the smallest crews in our industry that puts this starting line together with zero resources up in the middle of the North Shore. Luckily, there's one back road in this little neighborhood. Otherwise, this would be impossible, and it just happens to be at the half point of the marathon. Otherwise, I don't know how we'd even have a half marathon of any size. But they get this all put together at 6:15 a.m. There's about 35 or so people in this group, and that is unheard of. So it's just, this is kind of like a proud graphic. This applies a lot because the mission, similar to the Birkie, is all about fitness and wellness, and not only from, you know, a physical aspect, but mental as well. It's pretty much all but proven these days that these outdoor activities have a huge effect on your well-being in so many ways. I mean, there's doctors that are practically prescribing exercise these days over alternatives because of the effects that are starting to show through different tests that they're doing out there. So again, I'm not the science guy. I do read a lot about this stuff, but the Young Athletes Foundation is our way of giving back to the community and starting this at a young age, getting kids conscious of, a healthy lifestyle and the importance of fitness. So this all ties back to the social equity part of those pillars, because these sports are accessible, especially running. All you need is a pair of shoes. One of the programs of our Young Athletes Foundation is actually providing those shoes. We give 8 pairs of cross-country. During the cross-country season, we give 8 pairs of shoes to every high school team in a 5-county area. And in the track and field season, which is we're just dispersing now, we do 12. Those go to the coaches to determine who the most underrepresented, athletes are. And to get them a new pair of shoes puts them on, to us, the same level as any of the other runners. I mean, nothing else matters. You're all at the same starting line with the same equipment. And this is working through the local shoe stores in our region here. But we put on free programming for kids. We do free races all over town, try to keep them close to the bus stops, and we move them all over from Two Harbors to Cloquet to all over Duluth. And we're trying to make this sport as accessible for every person possible. And then we have a grant program, and that's providing up to $3,000 grants for any nonprofit that's focused on fitness in that same 5-county area. They just have to apply. They can get up to $3,000 every 2 years. And this is all funded by the YAF races, which we just had a sold out one last weekend called the St. Fennessy 4K. We'll have a Vickers 5K coming up. Similar to the Birkie, we have about half the events. They said, I guess we do about 22 throughout the year, in addition to Grandma's Marathon. They're all Young Athletes Foundation fundraiser related events and programs. This is one of my favorite pictures. Marathon weekend, we also have kids races there that are free and open to the public. We do a fit and fun run with the local school district here in Duluth with the help of Essentia Health. And then, I mean, you name it, if you can justify it, getting outdoors, we give to Bentley every year to get kids out walking around Bentleyville, get their free hat. We support the Salvation Army toy drive with basketballs, footballs, golf, you name it, frisbee golf, all kinds of equipment to get them outdoors. And then we have a college scholarship programs as well at a higher level. So that's kind of the background. Like I say, I wanted to run it real quick. I want to make sure you get my email address. You're all welcome to email any questions going forward. This is a picture of 2016. So this, I think, is where the conversation really starts, right? Applicable to this conversation. This was the last hot year we had, and the look on some of those runners' faces it was a struggle, but we got through it. So after the Twin Cities Marathon cancellation last year, that was the game changer in our industry. Now everyone is adapting. I mean, name a marathon. At the latest conference, we have one big industry conference that was in February around the Olympic marathon trials. And I ended up talking with California International Marathon, Cincinnati Flying Pig. You can literally name one, and we're all working on the same thing right now, and that's what to do going forward and what protocols to put in place. Let me stop sharing here because that's all the graphics I have at this point. Are we back to normal here? Okay. Yep. So what we did is we put together, it's essentially about a 27-page document of the different scenarios, how our advisory committee is going to work going forward. As bad as the Twin Cities scenario was, it was a great learning experience for everyone else in our industry. They got ripped apart, and nobody wants that. But it's worse it's just as bad for the organizer. No one wants to cancel more. No one wants to not have to cancel more than the organizers. I mean, that's what it boils down to. So then when they take such a beating, we all kind of try to support each other. And now we're all trying to improve everything that happened there. So the communication for the week of our event is going to be the big one. There's all these sort of levers, we call them, that now going forward we can pull in that situation. If it's, the forecast wet bulb globe temperature, which is the standard that we go by for warm weather events, is going to be forecast for 82. We know that level, if it starts to go above that, that's when runners are really going to start to struggle. And it's almost like a switch. At that point, we have to take all kinds of precautions to even be able to continue the race. But to make these decisions and watch it in this area, all the greatest things that I mentioned about Grandma's Marathon being this small town charm with a world-class event are also the worst things that relate to when we have to make these decisions. There's so many people in town. It's a much lower budget than your other races out there. So to cancel is a really, really hard thing to have to consider, and probably the most stressful. I mean, I already lose sleep over the possibility of it, but we never had to worry about this stuff before. We're on Lake Superior. It's like a natural air conditioner. You can have a marathon in June, and it really isn't too much of a concern. There's been some warmer years, but if you look back to 2012, which was the flood, obviously a weather event that happened after the marathon by a week. If that would have happened prior to the marathon, we wouldn't have been able to have a marathon that year because it ripped roads apart. I mean, literally, you could not cross roads. With running, no less with a car or anything else. It really messed up the community. 2016 was a little scary, but it gave us a measuring stick. We kind of know the limits of our medical team and where they get overloaded. And now with Twin Cities and the air quality being factors, it just seems like there's more concern. And this is the conversation that our entire industry is happening. Do you reduce the time that you can have the marathon to 6 hours? That extra hour could be crucial for the runners. We know how runners are going to react. There's just all these conversations happening at once. And I think that's the conversation that's kind of starting here around climate change related to tourism and outdoor events. But I think to leave as much time for questions, that's probably a good spot to open that up. I should just say the air quality. If you guys weren't following the marathon, we had this last year. On the Wednesday prior, it reached 186. That's getting close to pretty scary. I don't know that I'd want to be running in that, but 200 has kind of become the precedent that's been set by California races when the wildfires were affecting them, and they did cancel races. So liability gets talked about a lot in all this, and the conversation goes every direction. So I'd love to hear what questions people have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. That was wonderful. Yeah, there's so many great points that come up like across the Birkie and the Grandma's Marathon. And I guess, yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left. Thank you for Ben and Kristy for answering some of those questions in the Q&A already that have been typed in, and Ami as well. Folks, feel free to check that out. If you click the Q&A, you can look at the answered ones. But we do have some that haven't been answered yet, and I'll focus on those. So there's two from Sadie Newman here, and the question is, for small retailers who don't have the space or capital to invest in more varied inventory that could be swapped out based on current conditions, what kind of resources, support, or strategies are out there to help them better prepare and serve the community? And she noted she's from Winona, or the Miami of Minnesota.
By no means retail experts here in the Northwoods, but but from an outdoor recreation standpoint, we just finished a small study with UW River Falls over this year's Birkie, and as an example, so the economic impact for the weekend was $4.3 million, and when you look at where that was spent, obviously, hotels, restaurants, etc., but also retail was certainly a part of that. And what we're seeing is the local retailers that we're partnering through our Chamber of Commerce. What we're seeing is they're actually certainly dropping their inventory levels because it's too risky, obviously, when it's based on weather, that if they make a big purchase, and this goes hand in hand, what the most conversations we've had is with our local bike shop, as an example, and skis. And so in the days of, hey, we had a great winter, we're buying lots of skis. Well, that's not an easy inventory to turn in a year like this when there's no snow, and it gets old in a hurry. By next year, it's not worth it. So I think what we've seen here in the Northwoods, anyways, from outdoor recreation and the retail that's supporting it, is they're reducing their inventory numbers significantly, which certainly creates less opportunity, right? There's just less to sell, which means there's less opportunity to make more money, but it's reducing their risk. And at this point, they seem to be in the camp of trying to be more risk averse than trying to make more money, and a little bit of a conservation mode. And I think if for those that aren't aware, there is currently opportunities for low interest loans through disaster relief in the federal government, through that maybe some small businesses are aware of, that if you were impacted by drought, and yet we did have to explain that snow is frozen water, so that makes it a drought, that those impacted, that you were eligible for some low interest loans through the SBA. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
No, that's very helpful. Shane, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, or we can move to the next questions too.
Okay, I was trying to answer one of them already. So a guy that can only do one thing at a time.
Oh no, that's okay.
Nothing to add to that one.
Okay, let's it looks like Shinyi from the Tourism Center would like to answer Tyler's question about, are there any estimates on if there would be greater economic loss associated with climate change effects on winter recreation compared to non-winter recreation?
Yes, thank you so much, Jamie. And I really appreciate this question. And by the way, my name is Xinyi Qian. I'm the director of the University of Minnesota Tourism Center. And so we appreciate this partnership, the panelists, and you all, the attendees, and your engagement. And so the short answer to this particular question is not yet as of this moment, although I can assure you this is a very prominent question on a lot of folks' minds. And I particularly appreciate this webinar's setup in a sense that while in this particular time we have a winter, the lack of snow and ice high on our minds, we deliberately invited Shane, which is by and large a summer season event. So we cover both ends of the spectrum, so to speak. And so making this question even more meaningful. And I think this is a very legit question at a federal, like national level, regional level, state, and a local levels. And you know, in our ongoing conversations with, for example, the Outdoor Recreation Industry Partnership in our state, the Duluth Outdoor Recreation Alliance, so on and so forth, we will definitely continue to explore feasibility, timing, and the scope of such an economic impact project. We do have in-house experts who actually, for example, have worked with Shane before to estimate the economic impact of a particular event. And so how do we leverage and mobilize resources both internally and in a broader world to answer this very important question. And perhaps one day we can persuade the Bureau of Economic Analysis at the federal level to integrate it into their satellite account. So always worth an ask and a try, but I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And so thank you, Shinyi, and thank you also to the Tourism Center for co-hosting this with us. You bring such a wonderful additional lens to look at this. So we've got not that much time and quite a few questions. I'm going to have one for Shane here. I'm going to skip down a little bit. There's a couple in particular, we'll circle back to Ben and Kristy about the challenges of snowbanking and how much it costs, and from kind of a sustainability perspective, although you covered a bit of that. But for Shane, have you seen an increase in medical emergencies from heat, or has there been a race where there was a lot of wildfire smoke, that sort of thing? I think the answer is yes, probably, but I'll hand it over to you.
We haven't actually had a race where we've had to deal with wildfire smoke on the day of the event. Last year it was just really close to the day event, which was a scary situation. Medical emergencies, not necessarily, but that's a tricky one to answer. The stats are between 1 in 55 to 1 in 150,000 runners die. And it could be related to heat stress, but it also could be related to other things. The only scenarios we've really had are cardiac arrest situations. They've been able to be revived, and they're not necessarily in the warm years. But we do know that in our industry, in this region of the country, that if the wet bulb globe temperature gets too far above 82, our medical team is going to be overloaded. And then that's a situation you can't really get into as an event organizer, because, well, you don't want to lose your medical team, number one, but the two biggest things that restrict us and that we look at in being able to host the event is what the community can hold from an area perspective. We finish in Canal Park. If you look at a map, it's completely surrounded by water. And you can't cram this many people into one area safely without causing other problems that create a fire here. And if that happens earlier in the day, it creates a chain reaction of events where you have to now take people and put out this fire that you caused by allowing too many people in an area, whether it's waste or whatever. And then that takes people from somewhere else. And then and it's just this day of, it's not fun. And we have a reputation of putting on a pretty quality event. So we watch that. But more importantly is hospital beds. You can't overload your community's resources. And there could easily be other emergencies in our community on the day of the event. And if we're overloading the hospital, which then causes another emergency to have more serious problems they wouldn't have otherwise had, that's something we would never want either. So those are the, I guess, the big considerations. I don't want to say that we haven't had an increase in medical emergencies from heat, because if the heat gets high enough, I'm sure we will, to answer the question. But there's just so much more to this right now, and going forward. My biggest worry is the big picture. And when you have to cancel, like Twin Cities did, or if we have to do a similar thing like this, and this becomes more common, I'd hate to see people signing up for these events less because of the likelihood of such things. It's already very expensive to come to our event. We keep our entry fee really low, but hotels and all that, if you start losing out on all of this and your deposits and your travel and things like that, I'd hate to see this trend decrease the success of events which are focused on fitness and wellness. It's one of the most ironic things to me, like the pandemic, when all these events were shut down, and really fitness and health were probably the most important thing at the time, So that's, I guess, my take. It's a long answer to a loaded question, I guess.
No, that's a great answer. And it kind of connects well to Laura had a question in here about having stages and levels of actions that events are planning in heat or air quality mitigation plans for athlete safety. So you touched on a number of those things, and like the wet bulb index, what are some of the milestones and responses? So 2 for 1 there. Nice work. And then the other main question we had was really just for Ben and Kristy about snowmaking. We're running pretty short, so I'm going to pull up our slides while you answer that. But some questions in general about challenges of snowmaking, kind of the thought processes of the sustainability behind that, which you discussed a little bit in your presentation too.
I mean, I think, yeah, the idea of you don't want to make the problem worse. Of course, we need snow to have winter events, but if what you're doing creates even a bigger problem, aka climate change, I think that's not sustainable. So working actually pretty closely with the DNR on what the water, this year it was about 10.5 million gallons of water we used to make the snow that we skied on. So where does that go when it melts? ideally back into the ground where it came from. But there's those pieces as well as the energy pieces, as we mentioned, making our snow from solar power as opposed to just plugging into the grid are important factors for us when we look at that, as well as accessibility, because the other part is, it was touched on earlier, it's super important that you have access for all people to have the ability to recreate outdoors. And so in our case, it's working really closely with the local Ojibwa tribe and getting those kids those opportunities as well. And so that means, what is the terrain like? Do you make big hills, small hills, jumps? So all those things factor into, I think, when we start to think about snowmaking.
Yeah, it's definitely not our preferred courses and our preferred trail and terrain. And we have lots of infrastructure on the entire course that we don't have available on the shorter courses. So of course we prefer to be able to use all of that infrastructure. It makes our lives a lot easier come event time. So we prefer to have a normal amount of snow. I mean, we went from last year having so much snow, we were plowing it off the trail and didn't know what to do with it all, to this year where we had almost none. So we'd like to come to a balance there somewhere would be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that answer. And it's also awesome, like there's so many questions and so much awesome discussion. So folks online, please feel free to reach out to any of us and keep this discussion going. Ben, Kristy, Shane, Ami, Shinyi, thank you all so much for being here. We're going to put this up on YouTube so folks can watch the recording there. And yeah, thank you so much again. This was wonderful. So have a great rest of your day. And yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully connect again soon. Bye-bye.